First of all, people are lazy. And in the old system, if people were lazy, this came at the cost of the environment, right? In the lazy system, then people would get meat and dairy. But now, if you're lazy, then you get a vegan sandwich. So that now being lazy actually now helps the environment. So that's a great thing about the nudge.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Creating a Vegan World. My name is Andrew Alexander, and today we have a very special guest, Stoop from Rotterdam in the Netherlands. And he helped transform his university to make plant-based vegan options the default when they cater to the university, as opposed to having vegans have to order the special sandwich when they have catering events. So as I'm looking at other universities, other school systems that want to transform to 100% veganism, or at least get more vegan options into the menus, I definitely want to interview him and see what his strategy was and how this could be used to help us create a vegan world faster. So with that being said, you want to add to your introduction and tell me more about what the end result is, if you want to start with that?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on. So about 5 or 6 years ago, I overnight became vegan. And then what happens, right, is you get angry at the world and you want to change the world. So I'm definitely in that camp. And I noted that at my university, we were offering a lot of meals for free, lunches mostly. So you can imagine, right, every Monday at 12 o'clock, there's a professor coming in, he or she will give a talk about the research. And then the rest of the faculty is leaning back and enjoying a sandwich. And I wanted then, from that point on, I wanted a vegan sandwich, and I could get that, but I needed to go to the secretary and order a vegan sandwich. So then it would the next time there would be one. And I was thinking it doesn't make sense, right? I was looking at the environmental damage of the particular lunch that we had at the Monday 12 o'clock seminar. And turned out that as opposed to a vegan seminar, we were talking about 80 bathtubs of water in damage and 14 kilos of CO2. And for 14 kilos, I didn't really have like an intuition for how much that is, but for 14 kilos, you can have the hand dryer in the toilet blow for 24 hours, a whole year long, right? And this is just CO2 and water. And there's of course also methane and deforestation, loss of biodiversity, there are lots of other metrics that one can look at. But this was some data that I could find on the internet. So I thought, as a behavioral economist, wouldn't it make sense to switch the default? So the standard is meat and dairy, and I get to ask vegan, but we can also switch that, right? So the standard is vegan, and then people who want it have to ask for cheese or meat. And the nice thing about this is that there's still freedom of choice for everyone involved. So I wanted to implement this, and there was 4 or 5 steps that I took to actually get this done. Step 1 is actually get the information, right? So the 14 kilos and the 80 bathtubs of water. So you need to have your facts straight, especially when you work at a university, right? We are all about facts. Second, you need to think about the line of argumentation. Now, for me, actually, the reason why I did this was for the animal rights. But at the same time, I knew that this is not going to be a very popular argument to persuade people to change, especially their eating habits. So I focused mostly on the environment, but also what is the beauty about a vegan lunch is that it's so inclusive, right? So at our university, Erasmus University Rotterdam, we care a lot about being inclusive, but at the same time, we give milk to people who are lactose intolerant, for example, people from China. We give pork to people whose religion, right, the Muslims don't approve of it. So that's a bit weird, right? But if you go for a vegan option, then it's super inclusive. So that was also one reason that I added to my board. So then I thought I shouldn't do this by myself, right? If I go to the dean and ask for this implementation, it's this angry vegan who wants something, right? So I decided to go to the 15 or so most prominent people in my organization, and I would pitch them the idea. Look, why don't we switch the default? Freedom of choice for everyone, it's good for the environment, super inclusive. Would you sign a letter that I will write to the dean? Right, that was the only thing that people needed to do. It's super lazy, just sign a letter. And then with that letter, I could go to the dean, right? And I could say, look, this is not me who wants this. This is us, right? This is our whole faculty actually is behind this switch. And the 15 talks that I had were it was super easy. Within 2 minutes, I could convince almost everybody. So 13 out of 15 I could convince. And the other, well, one I could convince later on, and one was I could never really convince of anything. But that's
There's
also
always
fine.
one.
Yeah, right. So then I went to the dean and I said, look, here is the plan. It's the nudge. It's super good for the environment. This is something that we want. It's super inclusive. And by the way, we're the first, right? We're now the best faculty of all. And that's also something that the dean really liked. So the dean was also super enthusiastic. Within a couple of minutes, I was able to convince him. So then the last thing that we needed to do was to have a tasting, right? So it's the secretary who orders the vegan meals. And we thought it would be a good idea if they know what this is all about, right? Because let's be honest, still the reputation of vegan, well, it's now every year I think it's getting better, but about 3 years ago or so, 4 years ago, still it had a bit of a weird reputation. So we thought it would be a good idea if the secretary actually knew what it was that they were going to order. So we invited all of the staff of the secretaries. We gave them a vegan lunch. And in my impression, this was also a great success. The secretaries were mostly pleasantly surprised with how good everything tasted. So yeah, and as of then, we rolled out the whole thing for our faculty. Then, a little bit to my dismay, I'm sure if I say that correctly, but the whole university actually copied this thing, but then they had vegetarian as a default, which I think is really a missed opportunity, especially in the Netherlands. Vegetarian means cheese, and you can, so a stylized fact, so a sandwich of cheese is about 240 CO2 gram, 240 grams of CO2 equivalent, and pork is 180 CO2, 180 grams CO2. So meat is in that respect even less. Of course, hummus is 60 grams of CO2 equivalent. So that's actually the big winner. So I was a little bit disappointed that the university in the end decided to, for all the other faculties except ours, go for vegetarian as a default. But still, I think in the process of people becoming more conscious that meat is bad, I see there some value.
Definitely. So it's shifting in the right direction there.
Yeah. So that was the story.
That's great. And I think you mentioned those three presuppositions about how this works. You said, like, number one, people are lazy. They don't like to behave against the prevalent beliefs, and there's freedom of choice is not violated. Can you talk more about those three things?
Yeah, indeed. So in general, why are nudges effective? Indeed, right? It's that, first of all, people are lazy. And in the old system, if people were lazy, this came at the cost of the environment, right? In the lazy system, then people would get meat and dairy. But now, if you're lazy, then you get a vegan sandwich. So that now being lazy actually now helps the environment. So that's a great thing about the nudge. Second is that people just don't want to go against the norm. And the thing is, it doesn't really matter what the norm is, but once it's established, people don't want to go against it. And the beauty of my dean announcing so loudly, look, we will switch the default. We do this for the environment, right? So now the new norm is we do stuff for the environment. And then you can go once to the secretary, order your meat or cheese, but then there's this voice in the back of your mind, right? Saying, yeah, but you know, there is a reason why there is a change. It's for the environment. And our norm now is that we are pro-environment. And what I'm doing is a little bit going against that. So sure, you can do that once or twice or 3 times, but after a while, and especially if you see no one else doing it, it's because it's really, this norm becomes strong to actually stick with the vegan default. And finally, indeed, why nudges are so popular to implement is because there is still freedom of choice for everyone, right? The only thing is, in the old days, I needed to go to the secretary, which is, I think, a trivial cost. But now the ones who want cheese or meat have to go to the secretary. That's the only thing. But other than that, people can just get whatever they want.
Absolutely. That's amazing to hear. And then a few questions. So you mentioned finding out what your university cares about. So you said it was inclusion, diversity, as well as the environment, where if there's other examples, could like research about like maybe brain health, cognition on plant-based diet, where maybe excels academic performance, or are there other universities that might have different factors that people listening to this could use it in their thing?
Yeah, I think so, right? So there are tons of reasons why you want to go vegan. So health is also one example. However, I know that so I'm not well versed in the health arguments on veganism. Sure, I've seen lots of papers, but there are many people who then there's always papers on the other side of that story, right? And then if you're well versed in this, then by all means use it. But for me, I thought that I would be checkmate quickly if someone would wave with some studies showing that beef is super healthy, which I'm sure there are these studies, right? So indeed, health is a good argument. For me, I didn't feel comfortable because I'm not well versed in this domain.
And then when it comes to a lot of vegans watching this, they're obviously for the animals. Would the animal rights way, would that persuade universities, or is it more, I know mainstream, it's more about environment in the mainstream nowadays?
Yeah, so I am not sure. I'm trying to find out now how well the animal rights argument lands. Actually, in fact, after this meeting, I have another meeting with Erasmus Magazine, sort of the school newspaper. I wrote an article defending why Erasmus University is morally obliged to go fully vegan, and the whole argument is about animal rights. I think so. The thing is, I think this is the right argument, right? I think there's just not much to be said against it. However, somehow the feedback that I always get is that you're fully right, but this is not effective. And I wonder why, right? If you're right, you're right. But my experience is that people just don't go along with animal rights. They just go something like, oh yeah, but I simply just don't care about animal rights, right? It's the environment, I see that, health, I see that, but I just don't care about animal rights. And then, funnily enough, it's end of discussion. So that's my experience with talking to people.
Yeah, interestingly, go ahead. Earlier in the day, I spoke to a vegan psychologist where I had this conversation about like, why does the word veganism trigger people so much? And it's about, there's many answers she gave, but pretty much like, it makes you admit you're doing something wrong and people don't want to face that. So like, there's so much resistance about it, as well as freedom of choice is like, when people like, maybe they're stuck at a job they hate, they're not living their purpose, like they have their choice of the foods they're used to eating. And if you threaten to take that away from them, like, that's why there's so much emotional charge around the word vegan. So I had an interesting conversation. I didn't get to record it, but hopefully I can interview her in person.
Yeah, indeed. This is also what I experience. That people are so easily offended when it comes to what they eat, and I try to avoid that. Right. So the beauty about the environmental argument is that it's super politically incorrect not to care about the environment. Right. These days you have to be on board. Of course, the environment is super important, and then already you have a head start.
It plays in, like you said, being part of the majority. Cool. I know you said you have a few more like the other interviews today in your busy day. So there's 3 things I want to ask you. So we didn't prepare for this interview. I didn't send questions. So I'll say all 3 in whatever order you want to answer them in. So number 1 would be you have the Reddit thread where I could link that in the YouTube description, where it's like your blueprint for making this work. Were there any resources or things you learned from that you modeled to make this work? And then the second 2 questions are, there's people, let's say they want to shift the hospital system. where they want plant-based meals in hospitals, or people trying to shift the elementary school system for younger kids. Any tips for those? So I'll let you choose which order you want to answer them in.
Yeah, so let's first go with the Reddit thread. So I didn't really have sources. The only thing there is at our faculty, Professor Arthur van Schendelen, and his nickname is Professor Lobby. So I went to him to say, look, I want to have something done. What are the steps that I need to take? And actually he came up with the plan that I just laid out with all the steps, right? So I find that important to mention that.
Let me just recap that one real quick before we move on to the next one, because I'm looking at the Reddit thread. So the preview. So like you said, number one is like take photos of the standard lunch and find out like the research behind it, build your case against it. Then think about how to sell the story, and then bring other people on board, or selling the story, finding out what your university cares about, presenting that, get other people to support you, prominent leaders in the university, go to the dean, bring the letter, bring the research, bring everything, and then inform the caterer about what options work. And maybe, I guess an extra step you probably did is just like making sure it's the type of vegan food people enjoy.
Yeah, exactly. So these steps, right? So that's this came out of the great mind of Arthur van Schendelen, Professor Lobby. So when it comes to hospitals, I am not sure. I can imagine that having this nudge will work when faculty members of the hospital will actually push this. Maybe it helps also if patients are on board, of course. But I can imagine that like the doctors at the hospital would be the ones who could start such a thing, because I think it's just a strong signal if they want this, right? But I'm not sure. But I can imagine that this would be a strong way to go. Then there was one last thing.
Whether it's like schools for children, teenagers, or any other types of systems, like do you have any advice for how other people may change there?
Yeah, it's a bit tough. I am not sure, to be honest. I can imagine that teachers at schools would be a strong group to do this, but at the same time, on schools usually, I'm not sure. I don't know. At least in the Netherlands, but I'm not sure that all across the world this is different, right? But typically in the Netherlands, you just bring your own food to the school and then you eat it there, right? So there, I don't see really a way in how you can make
Understood,
people, right?
Yeah. I know in the US we have the option to bring our own food, or they have the school lunches. So I guess wrapping things up, were there any challenges you came across and other people who might want to do this at their university, that like challenges you face that you want to inform people about, or any final thoughts?
For me, the whole implementing this change was like a smooth ride. And that's why I'm so happy that I can talk about it. It's so easy to implement this. When I started this, I thought I could never pull it off. But that the beauty of it, that it's such a sympathetic idea, I think, right? Good for the environment, freedom of choice. Everyone was on board quickly. Of course, in the practical side, what I do come across is that sometimes the system is bypassed, right? You can imagine someone getting a vegan sandwich, gets angry still, even though there is freedom of choice, goes to the secretary, and then shouts some nasty things to the secretary, and then they think, oh, next time I better order what we thought usually was normal, and then so there are ways in which sort of then the system gets bypassed. So when I found out that this was happening, sometimes COVID happened, so I couldn't really fix it. But now things are getting more back to normal, so I'm more on top of things.
Definitely. Cool. Any final things you want to say, or any places you want to point people to, websites or YouTube channels or whatever?
No, not really. So there is indeed this Reddit website. People can always contact me if they want. Maybe you can put my email address on it, for example, somewhere. Or through you, go to me. That's also, I'm not sure how you envision this, but
sounds good. Yeah, I can put the Reddit thing in the description of the YouTube video, and then if you want your email address there, or that'll be there permanently, so you can email me at andrew@veganhealthpack.com if you have any questions, and I could always put you in touch if it's something to get in touch with. So cool.
Sounds great.
Yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your morning to do this. I know it's early for you, so thank you for that.
Thank you very much for having me on. It's an honor.